Hello my friends, I'm Andrew Fantasia. Welcome back to the countdown to Bond 25. When you were young and your heart was an open book, you used to say, live and let live. But if this ever-changing world in which we're living makes you give in and cry, well, you know the rest. Yes, folks, welcome back to the countdown, and we have entered the Roger Moore years, starting with the 1973 smorgasbord of blaxploitation, Live and Let Die. And yes, a James Bond movie is a smorgasbord of blaxploitation because James Bond, especially in this era, is all about kind of latching on to what is in vogue and making a James Bond movie where the set dressing is that vogueness. And at the time, what was in vogue were blaxploitation films. This is 2 years after Shaft took the world by storm. So movies like Shaft, movies like Coffee, they are just dominating at the box office, and James Bond wants in on some of that action, so we got Live and Let Die. This is one of my favorite Bond films, and I'm kind of biased, but it has a special place in my heart because, folks, Live and Let Die is the very first James Bond movie I ever watched. My mom had a nice big collection of VHS tapes, and I remember rummaging through them as like a 7-year-old, trying to pick one, and I went with the one that had tarot cards on the cover because the tarot cards looked cool. I literally judged the book by its cover, but you know what? In this case, it was kind of accurate. The famous Live and Let Die song is performed by Paul McCartney and Wings. Yeah, this is 73, so this is long after he has separated himself from the Beatles, spread his wings, and flown away. And Linda McCartney helped write the song as well. From what I remember, she helped write the little sort of Rastafarian interlude, and the title has skulls in it. So that's neat. Oh, this is a film of many firsts. Because it wanted to cash in on the whole blaxploitation genre, it gives us our very first African-American Bond lady and our very first African-American Bond villain. 2 double whammy firsts for the price of one. Also, the language gets a little saltier. This is the first time in a James Bond movie you will hear the word shit spoken out loud. And I gotta admit, it's a really funny scene, and they gave the word to a very interesting character. But we're ignoring the 6'1" Londoner elephant in the room. This is the first outing of Roger Moore as James Bond, and he will go on to play James Bond in canon Eon films more than any other actor, a record 7 times. Roger Moore is a very different Bond compared to Connery. Moore is more gentlemanly, he's more suave, and even the way he dresses himself is much more flamboyant. He's more of a dandy and less of a stiff, manly man. But you will definitely see the difference at once, going from Sean Connery in Diamonds Are Forever to seeing Roger Moore living it up and dying it up in Live and Let Die. Now, we get a couple gadgets in this movie, but what's kind of a bummer, and I keep forgetting this every time I watch it, is that we don't get Desmond Llewellyn as Q. He doesn't show up in Live and Let Die. I don't know where he was. I don't know what the deal was. Something just went amiss, and they didn't get Desmond Llewellyn, but we did get gadgets. So I like to assume in my head that there was a scene where Q showed up and was like, now pay attention, 007, and he gave him these gadgets. We just didn't see it. The gadgets in question are a magnetic watch that can attract metal things to it. Straightforward. The watch also doubles as a buzzsaw, which comes in very handy. Then there is a gun that fires air capsules at a very high velocity. If these capsules break open, they can work some oxygen-related nightmares on the room or on anyone they hit. Roger Moore starts off his season as Bond swinging for the fences when it comes to lovely ladies. He's got 3 of them in his freshman outing. First, we have Miss Caruso, the very lovely Italian lady who he is in bed with when we first meet him. Yes, our first shot of Roger Moore as Bond is just him in bed with a lady, because well, that's Bond. Why not? Then we move on to our first African-American Bond lady, Rosie Carver. Now, unfortunately, this is another instance of the writers of the 1970s not being very cool when it comes to writing women. Rosie Carver is a CIA agent who is also undercover working for the villains, so she's a double agent. You would think that would mean she's very capable, very smart, very brave, and very cunning. She is neither of those things, ladies and gentlemen. She is a complete coward. Rosie spends the entirety of her scenes crying, screaming, and being afraid of stuff. It's sad because, yeah, this is the first African-American Bond lady, so it would have been nice if they would have treated her with a bit more enthusiasm and respect, but we don't get that out of Rosie Carver. Then there's our leading lady herself, Jane Seymour, playing Solitaire. And woo, I'm gonna be upfront, I have such a crush on this lady. Long before she was Dr. Quinning her way into our hearts, Jane Seymour was introduced in Live and Let Die as Solitaire, the tarot card reading assistant to our villain. Solitaire was pretty much born in captivity to the bad guys and spent her whole life reading tarot cards for them and helping them with their sinister plans. Speaking of the villains and their plans, let's take a gander at them because this is one of the most villain-heavy movies of the series, and in all honesty, these might be my favorite collections of bad guys ever put to the silver screen. Our main villain is this gentleman, Dr. Kananga, played by Yaphet Kotto. You may know this guy from Alien. Well, before he was fighting aliens, he was trying to hold the monopoly on drug dealing. Yeah, in this movie, his plan is kind of weird, and I'm not sure if it makes all kinds of sense, but he is the dictator of a fictional Caribbean island called San Monique, where he grows opium in a poppy field, and his plan is to corner the market on heroin. He is going to give out over $1 billion of heroin absolutely free and create addicts in the communities all across North America. And then when those addicts come crawling back to him, that's when he is going to charge them, and he assumes they will pay whatever he asks for because he has now gotten them addicted, and somehow this is going to make him hold the entire monopoly on heroin. It's weird. It's a weird plan. But Dr. Kananga is a really cool villain. Even his name is just fun to say out loud. Dr. Kananga. It sounds so sinister. And Yaphet Kotto is an excellent actor. He brings this gravitas to the role. He brings this fury, this quiet, simmering fury, and at the same time, the very hospitable charm that has become synonymous with great Bond villains. At the end, when he has Bond in his clutches, he is just the most affable host you could imagine. Then we get his henchmen, and these dudes are something else. First, there's Whisper. He has something wrong with his vocal cords, so Whisper can only talk like this. Which sucks because Kananga forces him to work hospitality at the San Monique Hotel, so he has to talk to customers in that hoarse, gravelly whisper. It cannot be comfortable for him. Then we have this dude, Teehee. Yep, his name is Teehee, and he always has an amused smile on his face. He's always chuckling and laughing at something, hence the name. And he is missing his right arm. It was bitten off by a crocodile, so now he has an extremely strong steel claw that he uses to attack people, threaten to cut off fingers, and just generally be a nuisance to James Bond. Last, but certainly not least, I present to you the voodoo master of the undead, Lord of Cemeteries, Baron Samedi. I don't even know where to begin with this guy. In voodoo culture, there is a figure named Baron Samedi who is depicted just like this, who is a supernatural entity that rules over the dead. And somehow, with no explanation, this paranormal entity is also working for Dr. Kananga. I don't know how, I don't know why, but that's the thing. It's never explicitly stated in Live and Let Die, but there is some kind of supernatural stuff going on with the voodoo and the tarot cards. James, of course, lives in the real world. He's all meat and potatoes. He doesn't believe in any of this. Solitaire believes in the cards. She has spent her life reading them, so to her, they are religion. Then Baron Samedi pops in and out of the story. He speaks very rarely, and he has this otherworldly presence to him. They show some aspects of his character where it appears it's all smoke and mirrors. He rises up out of a grave, which James Bond later realizes is just a concealed elevator covered in dirt. But then he also gets shot in the head, and instead of his head bleeding, it just explodes like it's a piece of ceramic, and he looks up at it and just smiles, and then he gets away. And then James Bond kind of kills him again by throwing him into a coffin full of snakes. But then at the end of the movie, we see that Baron Samedi is still alive and well and laughing it up. Yeah, the movie's final shot is Baron Samedi sitting in the front of a train, laughing hysterically because he has gotten away. Is he actually supernatural? Is this some kind of paranormal entity that just happens to work for Dr. Kananga? Or was this all a really well-staged magic trick? I don't know. Frankly, I don't want to know. All I know is Baron Samedi is my all-time favorite James Bond henchman ever. He's even playable in GoldenEye 64, but he sticks out like a sore thumb because he's like 7 feet tall and he's wearing white coattails on a top hat, so probably don't play as him if you want to win. But he's the Lord of frickin' Cemeteries, man. How cool is that? And as far as I know, his only line of dialogue in the whole film is he pops up from behind a gravestone while playing a flute and says, "It's gonna be a beautiful day. A beautiful day." I want to see a spin-off about Kananga, Solitaire, Whisper, Teehee, and Baron Samedi just living together and planning crazy schemes and insidious plots and getting in one another's way and having misunderstandings. I want it all. I want this to be a Three's Company level sitcom. Oh my god, that would be the most entertaining thing in the world. Attempts are made on James Bond's life with 3 elaborate death traps in Live and Let Die, and all of them involve dangerous animals. First, there's the snake in the shower. When he checks in at his hotel in San Monique, a snake is fed through his shower in the hopes that it will bite him, and it doesn't. He kills it with hairspray and a lighter. The second death trap involves James being stranded on an island surrounded by crocodiles who are very, very hungry, and they get really close to chowing down on him, but he escapes by using their backs as a makeshift series of stepping stones. Finally, when Kananga has him in his lair, he ties James in Solitaire to a little crane that is slowly lowered into a pool of frenzied sharks. James and wildlife are not friends in this movie. For the best quote of the film, I'm going to have to give that honor to Felix Leiter. This is our 5th appearance of Felix, and he is played by David Hedison, one of the only, as far as I can remember, Felix actors who returns for another go. I think it's just him and Jeffrey Wright who come back. After James is attacked by Whisper, who is behind the wheel of an oversized white Cadillac with a red interior, James tells Felix about this vehicle, and Felix turns to one of his subordinates and says, "Get me a make on a white pimpmobile." I kind of want to join the CIA just in the hopes that one day I'll get to say that to somebody. As far as the most inappropriate, politically incorrect moment of Live and Let Die, I'm going to have to give that to Rosie Carver and the way she was treated. Not to beat this dead horse, but for the first African-American Bond woman, you kind of expect more, and they did not give her more. They just made her a terribly written character, and it's a crying shame. A lot of the movie also takes place in 1970s Harlem, so you get a lot of that early 70s slang to it. You get a lot of people saying jive and honky and all that jazz. But if it's any saving grace, the movie is much kinder to African American people than the book, because Ian Fleming was not kind to them. Not at all. In fact, if you don't believe me, why don't you go ahead and look up the novel Live and Let Die by Ian Fleming. Check out what chapter 5 is called. Just go take a peek. I'll wait here. You back? Yeah, sorry about that. Aside from Felix Leiter, James has other allies in this film. He has Harold Strutter, a CIA agent who, as far as I'm concerned, is killed off way too early. I really liked this guy, but he doesn't get a chance to do much. Then we also get a nice little callback to Dr. No, the first film, because we get Quarrel Jr., the son of Quarrel, the guy who helped out James way back in the first movie. Now, if my math is right, considering how old Quarrel Jr. is and how old Quarrel Sr. was, that means James Bond must be some kind of mystical entity who never, ever ages. This is a movie with Baron Samedi in it, so I'm going to go ahead and let that slide. We get to see James's private residence, his house, for one of the only times in the series. And it's a very nice house. His kitchen is spacious. He's got a nice espresso machine. He also has copper rooster bundt cake molds hanging on his wall. I wonder if James ever just sits down one day and makes a cake shaped like a rooster. I'd watch that movie. It'd probably be called License to Bake or something. Is that a cooking show in real life? James's travels are strictly set in North America on this one. He visits New York City, New Orleans, and the fictional island of San Monique, which I'm assuming is somewhere near the Dominican Republic and Haiti, considering all the connections it has to the voodoo culture. Whilst in Louisiana, James partakes in a boat chase along the bayou. He's just escaped from the alligators, and Teehee and Kananga's men are chasing him all throughout the swamp. And this boat chase, folks, is one of the longest action sequences I've ever seen in a motion picture. I timed it. It's 14 minutes long. From the moment James hops into the boat to the moment the chase is over and he gets out, 14 minutes have passed. But it's not a boring chase. No, those 14 minutes go by pretty quickly because there's a lot going on. And by a lot going on, mostly I mean we are introduced to who some may consider the Jar Jar Binks of the James Bond franchise. Ladies and gents, say hello to Sheriff J.W. Pepper. Played by actor Clifton James, J.W. Pepper shows up in this movie and in the next movie, and then he is never spoken of again. Because bottom line, J.W. Pepper is the most unflattering caricature of an American that you will ever see. He's an overweight, constantly sweaty, incompetent sheriff who lords over the roads, mistreating minorities and talking about how superior he is in every way. And as the boat chase goes on, he gets more and more frustrated to the point where he is essentially a cartoon character being outwitted by James Bond. and the villains at every turn. He is just a ball of sweat and exclamations, walking around, spitting tobacco on the ground, and saying lines like, "By the powers vested in me by the state of Louisiana, I hereby commandeer this vehicle and all persons within. That means you, smartass." Yeah, J.W. Pepper's a lot of fun, but he should not exist. And when we get to the next movie, we get to see how J.W. Pepper acts when he's on vacation in the Far East. Spoilers, it's offensive. But that is Live and Let Die, my first James Bond movie, and still to this day, one of my all-time faves. Roger Moore is excellent. He steps into the role, and right away, you are rooting for him. You have some of the best villains ever put to the screen. You have Jane Seymour being amazing. You have a 14-minute long boat chase. What's not to love about this? Plus, there's tarot cards and the Lord of Cemeteries. Drop the mic. Tomorrow, we're taking a trip back east to a different type of fantasy island where, yes, a small Frenchman will spot your plane in the sky, but you are never, ever leaving. The countdown to Bond 25 continues. See you then.